happy also to see that our Congresswoman Betty McCollum is putting strong effort in making helping the community, and so first of all I want to thank her for being here. At the same time, I want to thank all of you, and also we have with us today is Brooklyn Park Councilwoman Susan Park, and also St. Paul City Council Guy Cow. I'm going to go maybe start from Charlie and let everybody introduce themselves. And after that, once they come back to me, then I'll pass the time to our Congresswoman Betty McCollum.
I'm Charlie, and I'm Congresswoman Betty McCollum's staff.
I'm Josh Strack, also with Congresswoman's staff.
Hello, my name is Danny Yang, and I work with the Consultation and Civic Council.
Hi everyone, my name is Hmoob Twin, and I am a staffer to Senator Her.
Hi, my name is Hmoob.
I'm Dia Vang, Legislative Aide to Councilmember Yang, Ward 6.
Hi everyone, I'm Bo Taurabe, and I'm the Executive Director for the Coalition of Asian American Leaders.
I'm Data Vang Sitzler, and I am here as a community member as well as at the Ramsey County Public Health Department. So we're also paying very close attention to some of the matters here.
I'm Terry Vang, I'm on the Hmong Village Owners.
I'm Paul Wang from the County Council.
I'm Genghis Khan from the Vice President HGU veteran.
Dia Vang, one of the owners in Hmong Village.
Alan Smith, General Manager for Hmong Village, and welcome everybody.
Mitch Lee with Precinct 1 Fellowship.
Susan Posse, Council in the City of Brooklyn Park, and I just want to say thank you for this opportunity for all of us to come and talk.
Councilmember Nytal, Representative for St. Paul City Council.
So thank you everybody for your introduction, and I'll pass the time to our Congresswoman Betty McCollum.
Thank you so much, and I want to give my warmest appreciation to Hmong Village for hosting this. We've had many important discussions take place under this roof, and it's good to be here. It's good to be back home in Minnesota. The last time I was here, it was well, I've been here for lunch, but the last time I was officially here was 2010, and General Van Kao at the time joined us with many of the distinguished people around this table for the grand opening of the facility. And we got the message: you need more parking. You're working on it, right?
We could expand some parks, but it's still, the more you build, the more people come.
So, but that means Hmong Village is thriving, right? And that's a good thing, and that's something to be celebrated. So, and that's what makes today's discussion so sad, because the Hmong and the Lao and the contributions that have been made on University Avenue here in Hmong Village, and just all across the Twin Cities, to add vitality, businesses, and culture, and music, and great neighbors, makes today's discussion, all the more heartbreaking for me. We're gathered to discuss what is happening in the Hmong and Lao community here in the United States. As all of you here are familiar with, the Trump administration's been putting a lot of pressure on the Lao government to sign a repatriation agreement between Laos and the United States to accept Hmong and Lao residents who have received removal orders from Homeland Security. Recently, the Trump administration invited the Lao Foreign Minister to Washington for talks in order to seal a deal so that President Trump would have an open door policy to deport the 4,700 Hmong and Lao back to their homeland, where they have fled persecution and retribution in the aftermath of the war in Laos. And that prompted my office to send a letter to Secretary Pompeo, bringing to his attention that I was very much aware that he was negotiating with the Laos People's Democratic Republic on an agreement for deportation of long-time Lao and Hmong residents. People who came here as young children, to deport them back to the country of their birth. But I've also since found out that even individuals born in the refugee camp in Thailand, that the Trump administration considers them Lao charges, and so even people born in the refugee camp are part of that deportation. You know, this is going to tear families apart who have known no other place than the United States, such as their home. They're Americans. Just as the dreamers that we talk about who came here with their parents as very, very young children, they consider themselves as Americans. Well, this deportation will not only tear families apart, as I mentioned, but it's an insult. It's a betrayal to the 35,000 Hmong who were killed in action during the war, the Vietnam War, the secret war in Laos. It's your parents and your brothers, your uncles and your friends who served in the Lao Royal Military. They didn't get to pick and choose if they should rescue and recover Democrats or Republican service members. They rescued service members, and they did so putting their own lives and their families' lives at risk. And I know that I serve on the Defense Committee. I've been active. I was just with the Veterans of Foreign War this month, and they appreciate and they honor the sacrifice that were made to rescue and recover Americans. So your service and your sacrifice assisting U.S. military actions will not be forgotten by me, and it should never be forgotten by this country. I want to thank the veterans, among the veterans community who are joining us here today and who have sent letters in support of the work that we're doing on. So thank you, sir. I know you represent many, many thousands of people behind you. As your member of Congress, I want you to know I'm doing what I can do to stop and prevent the Trump administration from forcing the Lao government into signing this agreement. And that's why I introduced the legislation that we put around the table today. It's H.R. 6034. It's to defer the removal of Hmong and Lao residents with final orders of removal from Homeland Security. It's an important step forward, and I'm eager to work with my colleagues in Congress to fix this 1996 law when Congress takes on comprehensive immigration reform. This also has to be part of that discussion. We passed around copies of the bill. If you have it, you will see that we have representation from members of Congress who are honored to represent Hmong and Laotian from across the country on that, as well as our neighboring state, Wisconsin, California, and there are others who approached me this week as they're learning more and more about these pending deportations. I just want to touch briefly on my conversations that I had. The ambassador from Laos to the United States was in my office. They are receiving great pressure. They have told the Trump administration numerous times that they do not consider the people on the list that the Trump administration wanted to deport citizens of Laos. They have no family ties, no cultural ties, no ties to the community at large, but they do have ties to those of us here in the United States. They are being pressured with sanctions on visas and other such issues, and they are at this time standing firm and not wanting to take back who the Trump administration wants to round up from our homes, from our communities here in Minnesota and across, and deport back. I do want to be clear, they said if anyone wants to come back to Laos, they're welcome to come back, but they do not want people who are removed forcibly from their homes, their families, and their communities here in the United States to be forcibly returned back to Laos. But before I forget, there's one thing I think all of us at this table know is really important, and I can't miss an opportunity to talk about it, and that's the census. Because we can get busy talking about this, and then I don't want to forget this. So in light, especially what's happening with the fear in the community about deportation, any documentation from the federal government, where they're asking you to list family members or how many people are in a household, takes on a new sense of anxiety, right? But this census is so important because it will mean that missing one person in the census count could mean that we in this, here, we could lose up to, all kinds of opportunities for money for healthcare, for money for roads and bridges and just day-to-day life. That's so important because that census, everybody needs to be counted, becomes a formula in which money that taxpayers, we as taxpayers have paid into the federal government are returned back to our community. And I know that the census is important to the state of Minnesota. It's important to our municipalities as well too. So if people have questions on the census, they can contact our office, other local officials. But this is something that we can't take for granted during these stressful times in the Hmong Lao community with deportation, that getting something from the federal government might indicate to someone that they don't want to touch it. We need people to fill out their census reports, and I think everybody up here shaking their head, yes, let's hear yes, fill out your census, yes. So with that, I want to thank you for your time, and I want to take a few, some questions here. We have many people who wanted to join us today, but because of conflicts weren't here and we're in contact with them.
I just want to see if anybody had questions first, especially those of you who are from the community or from a stakeholder agency. Before elected official like myself and the Superintendent, Councilman Back, we mainly just going to clarify how. So first, just want to see if anybody else has questions for Congresswoman Betty McCollum, and I'm here standby, and also Councilwoman Susan Pai and City Council Dai Tao also stand by for any question that you may have to us too.
So I don't understand all of what you're going to be proposing, but I was just curious if you can explain more about the 72 months thing, because I feel like while it is good, is it just a period where after the 72-month period, is it going to open the door wide open for people to just be deported then? Is it just a 5-year wait until that door actually opens?
So we need to fix the 1996 law, the comprehensive immigration law, and so for this, I want to have a placeholder to give families and individuals pause and relief that they will not be deported while we fix this problem and make it go away, but we have to do major immigration law changes. And there are many other communities that are standing together. Your community is standing together, the Hmong and the Lao community. We need to continue to do that. Your allies like myself and others need to stand with you, but we also know that this is a challenge in the Vietnamese community, other communities that are facing deportation. So we need to bring an end to this. People who come to this country as children, who grow up, saying the Pledge of Allegiance, who grow up going to our schools, attending our colleges, our universities, people who are vibrant members of our community, who sometimes through no fault of their own didn't receive full naturalization. We need to go in and we need to fix that so that for once and for all, people feel welcome and safe in the United States.
So that time period would be a period for people to try to fix that and for laws
to change? It's a period for legislators to fix that, that's correct. But somebody said, oh, you can do it for 12 months, or why don't you just do it till the next presidential election? But we wanted to make sure that people would feel secure by 72 months, that would give us the time to do things properly, so it wouldn't be like, as we see with some of the other refugees here, like every year or two they go through the renewal application. So we do want to fix it permanently. That's my goal to do that. But in the meantime, to give everybody that chance to really kind of exhale and get together and fix the law? So that's a great question. Thank you much for asking that. But in the meantime, we want to make sure people have the ability to work. So if you see after that section of the bill, it talks about people being allowed to continue to work.
If I can ask a little clarity before we move on to the next question, is that there's 72 days, right? Month, the 72 month. Is that after the bill is passed, right? And since right now it's still in hearing, so when are we expect that the bill is likely to pass, and when would that be?
So one of the important people on here, who's one of the authors on this, is Ms. O'Loughlin. She's from California, and she's on the Judiciary Committee, and she's an expert on immigration law, and she has worked to stop many of the removals that President Trump has worked on to bring focus and highlight on it. So I'm hopeful that we will get a bill hearing in the Judiciary Committee. We are currently actively seeking a sponsor in the Senate. We are having conversations with people. So as you know, I served on the city council, so it was one stop, and then you had to get the mayor to sign it. But now you and we have to get other people to be engaged in it. And that's why today's meeting is so important. We have to keep the awareness without crazy, you know, people in the community are fearful. And we want people to be organized, we want people to be standing together, speaking out about this, to put a spotlight on it, and also to let the Lao government know. That was part of the conversation I had in my office with the Lao government, that I don't agree with the Trump administration, that I do not think the Lao government should even be asked to take these individuals back, forced to take these individuals back, that we need to work through our problems here in the United States and not allow the Trump administration once again to, you know, we see this happen. There's a common denominator here, right? Africans, Latinos and Latinas, Asians, and it's all about creating fear and division in this country. And what we need to do is we need to stand united to say, no, we are not going to be part of the Trump administration's divide Americans, pit Americans against each other, against refugees who come to this country. So it's a real push on refugees all over. The Hmong and the Lao are just the latest to experience this lack of empathy, and I would say lack of appreciation for what the Hmong and the Lao people did for our servicemen in the war.
Representative Hmong, thanks for coming. I guess my question is, so besides this, and if this moves and how it moves and things, can you talk a little bit about that perspective about kind of other refugees? And I know you were aware that this issue is not only impacting the Hmong and Lao, it's the latest community. But are there other efforts in which you're seeing, if this doesn't move, what are other strategies that are already moving that you might be working to support to you know, give communities some sense of what's possible to do at the federal level at this point?
For example, the Vietnamese government signed documentation with the U.S. government to do deportation. If we can fix this law, they can be allies with us in stopping that from happening to their community members as well too, and other communities. So we need to reach out. I know many of them are like, they want to be included in the bill, but some of these governments have already signed the agreements, but if we can change the law, we can go back and change that for them as well too. So we need to be united to prevent, to the best of our ability, the Lao government from signing this, because if the Lao government doesn't sign that they will accept them, then they won't be going there. And that's why it's the last community that we're seeing is facing this, you know, I just think horrific action against refugees.
And I think one of the things that we had heard was that the administration feels that they do not need any memorandums to deport, that it is the duty of countries to deport. And so I just wonder if there are other administrative mechanisms that prevent, you know, this kind of aggressiveness, right? So I wonder if you thought about that, because that is something that we've heard, right? That it's not just about, and you know, our push for having an actual memorandum is that at least everybody can see it, and we would then have conditions to understand how to hold our own government accountable, but without a memorandum, and if the belief is that they indeed do not need it, what are other mechanisms that might prevent deportation of this community?
Either the Lao government agrees to take or they don't. And the Lao government right now is like, if people want to willingly come back, they are welcome back. They have told the administration that, my understanding, and things can change from day to day, but my conversation with the ambassador to the U.S. from Laos was that the person had to be willing, and they had to have a family member, and they had to have connections. And if all those mechanisms were in place, then they were welcome to return. And that's, so I'm not going to get into negotiating what the Lao government may or may not want to do. I just think that what the Trump administration has been doing to refugees is wrong, and we need a comprehensive immigration reform. But to make a community that came here under fled for their lives, for children born in refugee camps or brought over here very young, who have known no other home. You've done pretty good in trying to keep the younger generation engaged and being dual language. But you know, they've never lived over there. They have no connection. The United States is their home. And if they've committed an indiscretion or they've committed a crime, because that's how this deportation is based on, right? I come from a culture of forgiveness and reconciliation. And that's a culture that they grew up here in the United States. And you know, we are working on restoring voter rights to felons. That's something I'm working on, and I know you are too. We're working on showing that we are a community of once you've done your time and you want to turn your life around, our community welcomes you back in, right? Restitution. Circles, there's different communities and cultures have different words for that. These young children, that's what their expectation is from their community, because this is the only country, the only home that they've known.
If you can help update us on, since the bill has been introduced, what kind of movement or support are we getting from the other side of the aisle? I don't recognize all the name here, so if there's some from the Republican Party.
So, as you know, there was an editorial in the paper from someone from the Hmong community who was actually running against me for Congress and said I was instilling fear. And that this was, you know, nothing to be alarmed about, nothing to be worried about, and that's just absolutely false. Deportations are being planned. There is being pressure put on the Lao government. So at this time, I think it is very clear to me. We asked my other colleagues, Mr. Hagedorn, Mr. Emmer, and Mr. Stauber to join into this. And as this bill was being introduced, we saw my congressional opponent, who's running as a Republican, put in the letter to the editor, and they did not respond to our office, which I think is a missed opportunity, because on other immigrant groups, on Liberians, everybody worked, you know, for the most part, people were working together on that, and you deserve no less from other members of Congress.
Any other question from the first side? How much time do you have, Congresswoman? Can you help me?
Well, I was told at 11 or 12, so we have now at 11. And I think maybe forgive my ignorance, but
I'm a teacher, there's no such thing as that.
A lot of people don't understand executive order versus a bill, and should there be a special classification to protect refugees versus immigrants? You know, so this is applying to refugees and immigrants, or is there a way that you can explain so we can understand?
So the difference between refugees and immigrants, part of it is how you are, how you enter the country with your status. You've entered your families have entered the status as refugees. And refugees are, to me, immigration is important, and I don't, but refugees, having been to refugee camps, having gotten to know so many people, both Hmong veterans and U.S. veterans, and how important your support in protecting lives and returning remains back to families, quite frankly. Honoring our service men with burials and remembrance and great sadness in your hearts. That just has a very special status here in this community for me. But to your point about the bill, that's why when we go through and we do immigration reform, it'll include refugee, it'll include all different forms in which people enter this country. Thank you.
Just have a follow-up question. Have there been any discussion about safety and security for people who will be, you know, if nothing happens and the 4,700 people that are being targeted is being deported to Laos? Have there been a discussion to ensure their safety and security?
That's an excellent question. So you were saying if these individuals are to be deported, what guarantees their safety and security? That's an excellent question, and that's something I'm concerned about. I'm very concerned about. You put someone in, they have no family ties, they have no ties to the community, they don't speak the language, they've been labeled as being criminals, right? How safe and secure would they be in the country? I question that. I question that greatly. Right now, for the few people who have decided they've self-deported, there's been the U.S. Embassy has a small house. I spoke to our ambassador to Laos, the U.S. ambassador to Laos, and they try to work on some culture, try to find family and a few other things. And usually the people who have self-deported do have family members or someone there that there's a connectivity to, so they're in a much safer environment. But just to start forcing the Lao government to take anybody the United States wants to choose and at any given time just drop an airplane full of people over with no support systems, no guarantee. And even if, and I would even say, even if the Lao government was to try to attempt to guarantee, there's no guarantee how successful that would be. They're a very limited sourced country. Their first worry and concern is going to be to their citizens, right? Not to people President Trump would have forced upon them. So I think you're right to be concerned about their safety and their well-being, and I totally agree with that and express that both. I've expressed that in statements that I've made publicly, and I also expressed that to the ambassador to the United States from Laos. And he's like, you know, these people would not be welcomed back. And to your point, that should make everybody feel very concerned and very alarmed.
Yeah, one of the reasons that prompted attention to ask the question is that, as you can see, the world report the coronavirus. If you see the map, you don't see Laos in there. That means Laos never have that kind of problem. The World Health Organization reports AIDS and HIV. Our don't see Laos on the list. Laos is problem-free. It's probably one of the most corrupted countries on earth. And we don't put a measurement, and we keep sending all these people back, whether it's volunteer or forced. there is no way our community can be happy with our government not to put a measurement to ensure their safety and security. 3 months, 3 years from now, of all the Hmong refugees that came to America, we are being labeled as the opposite of the people who fight against communism. That means we are already a criminal over there to begin with. And so if there's no measurement, there is no way these people will be safe. That's just my 2 cents.
You made my point for me very eloquently. That's spot on, that's a concern. If we're to engage with the law government to have it be more open, this is not the way to do it, right? It should be through some of the trade that this community has been working on. It should be through cultural exchange. It should be so many other opportunities to do so. During the last flu battle, H1N1, I was working to have our doctors, work with their doctors and their hospitals, and you can be part of a surveillance system. We can work together. It's a very closed society, to your point about not being very open about numbers and that. So why would you even think, why would I even think that the Trump administration would care what would happen to these individuals when they're forcing a deportation on them? It means that they don't care about them. So they wouldn't be concerned about what's happening with them once they're returned. They wouldn't be checking in on them to say, are you okay? Or they wouldn't be deporting them in the first place. So I think you made the point very well.
Okay. I was just wondering if what Congress, what the state is willing to do immediately to help provide mental health services to family who were impacted by this recent deportation. Maybe from the Council on Asia Pacific, are there any money or resource that we can help families who are dealing with mental health right now?
I think that's an excellent question for one important reason. People who went through war go through trauma, and it's intergenerational. People who fled for their lives and went into refugee camps experience trauma. That's intergenerational. And it wasn't an easy move here. That's trauma. That's intergenerational. And then you add to what we know, soldiers, it's called different things in different eras, whether it's post-traumatic stress syndrome, back in World War I, it was called shell-shocked. We know that people are dealing with a lot of mental health issues, especially families that have been through so much trauma. Even if at the end of the journey was to be someplace safe, there's still trauma. So right now, it would just fall onto our normal mental health system, which we all know, and we have someone from Ramsey County here, right? We know is under-resourced as it is. So this is just adding more pressure to our mental health challenges here in Minnesota and around the country, because it's just isn't in Minnesota where this is happening. So we need to stand up and ask for resources and protect the healthcare resources that we have here now that are under attack. I'm going to be political here because we just got the president's budget. You can see it. That's under attack in the president's budget.
I'm sorry to be rude, I need to run, but I have a request, and being that you had just met with the ambassador, I wonder, to Tom's point about being concerned, and we had also inquired about what is the process for receiving individuals who have been deported, and our understanding was that there was none. Once they get there, they really sort of just turn them over. But given the great concerns, I wonder if your office might send a request to the ambassador to actually document if there is any administrative processes and how that happens, because I do think that that is a great concern, and there are individuals who certainly have been returned who have let us know that they have not gotten any sort of help, and so even with the transitional facility that is there, that they didn't even know it was there, right? So I just feel like, yes, do everything to prevent this from happening, and then administratively, what can we learn about what the administration, or, well, we know what the administration will or won't do publicly, but it just feels like that is an urgency to understand what might be in place to when folks are returned.
Well, I could certainly do that,
Yeah.
but I think let's be honest, I think we all know the answer. We're cutting health care for Americans here. We're putting work requirements on Americans here. We've told immigrants that are here, you know, if you ever apply even for SNAP for your kids, or you even go to a healthcare facility to make sure your child's healthy or to get immunized, that's gonna count against you. So I don't think this administration is going to be helping people that they deport into our country. These are people that they see as disposable. So I can certainly ask that question. I did a little bit from the ambassador, but I don't want to raise hopes and expectations that this administration, even if they said that, oh, well, you know, we'll look into it, that they would follow through on it. When we see what's happening with folks here at home having services cut, and the cuts in foreign aid in general, and then using, you know, visa and possible, you know, foreign aid, the little bit that even goes to Laos as a hook or as a trigger, we'll cut it off if you don't take people. So I, as a mother and as a sister, I get what you're saying, but I don't want, you know, even if I was even to make an inquiry like that, I would not want to raise any kind of false expectation that this administration would, I'm trying to use good language here, would give a darn about what happens to those individuals. Because if they did, they wouldn't be looking at deporting them in the first place. But I appreciate your comments, and I hear what you're saying.
Yeah. I just want to say that, before you leave, I want to thank you for the work that CALB does regarding the voluntary deportation issue. I know that you've held several community meetings in which these concerns have been addressed. And mainly because of the leaders in this room, the leaders in our community, that have really heard from the people the concern and taken that step. I also want to just say that, you know, we all have a part in this work, and that means that all of us, individually, collectively, together, have a part in whether or not things is going to move and whether or not work is going to progress and in the direction where we're going to prevent this from happening. Congresswoman Betty McCollum, thank you so much for your bill. I do want to say that there's many things that we can do for the people at home, the people at this table, is we need to write our congressmen and women and let them know that this bill is out there and that we need their support on this. My congressman, Dean Phillips, is already on here, but as well, we need to write all of our congressmen and women and say, look, this is important to us and we need your support on this bill. And we need to reach out to our elected officials and also do the same. Those are the ways that we can contribute. I also just want to say that don't forget your local elected officials like myself, city council members, our state representatives, our state senators, because unless we hear from people, we're just basing our work off of what we think we know that people want. And oftentimes, I know you guys will feel this way too, when I go to my colleagues or I go to the mayor or I take it a step further, I want to show them these are concerns that came from the community. You see the letters I received? There's hundreds of letters that I've received. There's hundreds of people coming to me. That has power when we do that. But if I know there's concern out there, but I don't receive one letter, one phone call, or one email, I've got nothing to stand on. And I just want to encourage the people at home, I know all of you guys are very concerned. I know the people here at this table is very concerned. But if you are, please write your council members, write your state representative and your state senators, write your congressmen and women and U.S. Senators. Because unless you do that, they don't know if there's really the amount of people out there that really do care about this. Work can get done. And this bill needs to have traction, and it needs to pass in order to help our community. I just want to give a quick update that as a council member in the city of Brooklyn Park, we have been working the last couple of weeks on putting together a resolution. And a resolution is really a statement of support for the Hmong and Lao community that are subject to deportation, something that we're going to be sending to the Secretary of State and to our governor. We know our governor is already supportive of this, but we want to let him know that we support our community. And that's something that everyone can be a part of in your own way. Take a part, do what you can do. That's the extent of my power as a council member. I want to let everyone know, but we all must do our part, right? Whatever part you can take, you must do that part, because only then can we really do something and make something happen. I also want to say that we are aware of the panic that's out there. It's very real. I've talked to many people who are really scared. I don't want you to panic. I don't want you to live in fear. But I want you to be concerned because it is very real. And I want you to be proactive and actually do something about it. I know sometimes we don't know what to do. So reach out to the people here at this table. Reach out to the nonprofits, the community organizations. Reach out to your elected officials and say, how can I be part of this? How can I be a part of making something happen? I just wanted to say that because it does take all of us. It takes all of us to make this happen.
Yes, yeah, okay.
Sorry, I feel like I'm taking up a lot of your time, but I just want to say I really appreciate the work that you're doing, and that it's important. And as I'm looking around, I know that every single person in this room will be impacted, whether directly or indirectly, because we're all going to know somebody that's going to be impacted by this. So this is important work, and I appreciate it. And I also appreciate what you said about supporting families. And so I know that we as a county are looking at how we can provide wraparound services to support our families within Lansing County. And then we're looking at also what, resolutions and proclamations and all those things in support of the work. But I do have a question for you related to the bill, which is, it's important that it gets passed, but what are we doing? What are you doing as far as getting bipartisan support, and what happens if it doesn't pass?
Well, I'm reaching out and I'm talking to individuals, but it doesn't, a real mixed message, I think, was said by the editorial from the person who wrote it, saying that, I was creating fear and, everything's fine, basically. So it's up to you within your community to kind of, I love the way you said that, Susan. Be concerned, because when you're in fear, you can freeze up. This is not the time to freeze. This is the time to come together, to coalesce, to move forward, to take action, and to ask others to stand with us, and to have a movement on this, and to reach out to the other immigrant communities here in the Twin Cities, the churches, the mosques, the synagogues. I've been talking to many Jewish members about this, and they're expressing interest in. We have one representative on the bill already, and he's talking to more of his colleagues on this. We need to get a Senate author, and as I said, we're talking to people about it, but we have 2 senators here in Minnesota. We have Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin, and we have other Senate offices that we can be talking about. I'm going to try very, very hard to get a hearing in judiciary, but this is where the community is impactful in the multiplying effect. the effect of all the allies that you have here in the Twin Cities. You know who they are, the nonprofits and that Susan, to get them to do letters of support, to get the same, and then to talk to your counterparts in Wisconsin, in California, there's a group that used to be very engaged in Boston. You have family and outreach all across this country now. And to do that, don't underestimate the power of the phone call, the power of the letter. And I think when Republicans see that this is something that you see as a fundamental human rights issue of how people who have lived in this country and grew up in this country are treated, we will change hearts and minds on this. And I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to give up on this. And the more of a spotlight we put on this, I also think the Lao government knows, hey, there's people who agree with us. These people should be coming back. And it helps them perhaps in resisting some of the Trump administration's punishments. And that's what they're doing. They're not using any carrots on this. They're using sticks. We take away visa. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And they're ratcheting it up. So if they know that they can point back, and that's why I took the meeting in my office, they can point back and say, not everybody's agreeing that what you have is a good idea or a great solution here. The United States is a democracy, and we're hearing from other voices, so other voices are important to hear from. But building those allies is so very important, and we have them in this community.
Okay, this is going to be my last question for the concern about the other veteran from the Hmong veteran action history to protect the human rights for the Hmong people in the United States. And back to what we heard about the deportation here, and we have a lot of phone calls out in the country for the concern deportation. And back to what we follow up the system and the law government regulation of law, and they label the Hmong people for tourists from the United States since 1961 to 1975, and used the bomb B-52 more than World War II for the Lao government and the Lao population in the Southeast Asia. Very tough concern about the war. And the Hmong people, we support the United States for over a long time. And now, a lot of phone calls from the elder people and the family all over the United States, and concern about the deportation here. And they might die before they deport, or they might want to die in Laos, because of they heard the secret from the internal Laos. And anybody deport to Laos, they have to put injection. Let them die at least 6 months or a year after. And that caused a lot of people scared. And part of we follow up, and they did the same way for the Hmong people only in Laos. And now, so we like to know how the bell here, we really appreciate, but how we can protect the Hmong people now until the bell here improves. Back to the next 2012, one guy, his name is Jay Tao. He had a serious problem with the family. They report to the immigration required to deportation him. And before he make a phone call for me, it's too late, and then cannot able to protect him. And he used the poison to poison himself. And after he died in St. Paul, Minnesota. And after that, we went to the immigration to complain about the document to deportation him. Immigration denied to communication with the Hmong community and the veteran. And now we're really concerned and would like to know how we can live people or the Hmong people or the United States to come down and for the concern, because we have a lot of concern and maybe we are critical Hmong families more than the VC from China. And I'm here, so I'd like you to help to answer the question and see what we can tell all the people to cool down.
Well, I think you raise a good question. We have a letter in the back, and my letter to the Secretary Pompeo's on one side, and on the other side is a response back. And in the third paragraph, it says, before receiving their final orders to remove, these Lao nationals had the opportunity to seek protection from return if they fear persecution under laws consistent with U.S. and it goes on to international law. You know who the veterans are. They would definitely, in your opinion, be a target. Family members of those veterans would be a target. And I think that's something that working with the community, the councils and things like that, to come up with another letter to them asking, like, what documentation do you need to protect yourself from this if you're a veteran? Might be one step we could look at. I don't know how. You mentioned the person went through immigration, it didn't happen. So, we've got attorneys and folks to talk to and really put the pressure. That's another way to put the spotlight on why these deportations are so wrong, right? And the risk that people could be at being deported. So I think your question is a good one, but I think it is one for us all to work together as allies and community on what we can do to make sure that people are fully informed of their rights and their rights are respected. Thank you. Hi, welcome. Why don't you come over here? It's not going to go that far. Welcome.
Thank you. Come closer. Maybe I don't actually need this.
I think it's easier for people.
All right, so many of the individuals who are still here know who I am, but for the record, my name is Sia, and I am the Executive Director at the State Council on Asian Pacific Minnesotans. Just to be sure that you all understand, our statutory role and responsibilities in government is to advise the governor and the legislature on behalf of all Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in the state of Minnesota. And yet, even as a state agency, we recognize very keenly that federal policies have local impacts. And so on an issue like immigration, we are often called on by members of the community and members of our congressional delegation to weigh in, if not to, but for the most part, facilitate communication. And so, Congresswoman, first and foremost, I want to thank you for your leadership on this issue in all of the years leading up to today, and I want to thank you in advance for your ongoing leadership on this issue. I know you brought up the fact that there have been grievances leveraged by leaders of the community, including some of the very organizations that we would right off the bat assume are our partners in this ongoing fight for justice for our communities. You mentioned several times that there have been accusations that you're politicizing this and that you're causing panic and fear. But I want to be one of those individuals who make it very clear to you that I understand that your letter, and it's already increasingly clear, but it will become crystal clear in the months to come, that your letter was the canary in the mine. Without your letter as a catalyst, we would not be having these very much needed conversations about how, when, and why we should mobilize. And without that letter, we would not be having these conversations that demonstrate our recognition that we are the ones we've been waiting for. And so thank you so much for your leadership and your letter. And I want to make it clear to the community members that sometimes it can be difficult for you to understand the council's statutory role and responsibilities, but we're here to assist in the most appropriate manner. We've taken a position on this issue. We have stated very crystal clear that we are against the deportation of legal permanent residents. And what that has allowed and will allow us to do is to assist you with, for example, the act of writing a letter to be sent to any members of the Minnesota's congressional delegation or others. It's also really important that you also communicate with your state legislators and the governor. We're more than happy to help facilitate communication between you and these entities at the state level. And then, to Councilmember Dietel's comment earlier about mental health. If it helps, know that the Minnesota legislative session is at play right now. You have Senator Hurst sitting to my right here. It's totally possible that you could approach any members of the Minnesota legislature or our office and suggest the idea of a bill to be pushed through the process asking for appropriations for mental health support. That's not something impossible to do even in a bonding year like this one. So I want to put that on the table. And really thank all of you for being here today. Many of you have responded beautifully to our call for assistance, and really thank you so much for your leadership, and then of course, Congresswoman, thank you for your leadership and your ongoing support. We're all going to need one another in the coming weeks and months and years. Thank you.
Congresswoman, you mentioned the editorial board cover on a couple of occasions about the comments that the comment that was put in there regarding being scared and not being scared. Is there a way that the community can reach out to a particular source of editorial and share our thoughts and opinions? I think if your office could share that with the community members and leaders in the community should take leadership and write them, not particularly more like individuals who are saying this and that, but for them to understand that this is real and it's not politics, and it's happening to people's lives and damaging people's lives. And now and many years to come, and perhaps many generations to come. So I think it's very important that we know that source so that we can individually or organizationally or collectively read them.
I think that the people in this room are capable of organizing to make that happen. And it has happened for other immigrant communities and other refugee communities that have found themselves in times of peril. And the editorial boards have been educated, enlightened, and taken positions of supporting people's rights. And so I think that that's a wonderful idea that you have. We have press contacts, but I also know you have press contacts, and you have press contacts. So I think a couple of you can get together and decide the best approach on moving forward that. But not just here in Minnesota. There's reaching out to the New York Times, the Washington Post, newspapers in California are starting to cover this a little bit. The coronavirus is taking a lot of oxygen, right? But that doesn't mean that you don't still mobilize, organize, and that. So I think there's the people in this room who know exactly how to do that, and anything we can do to be helpful, we are ready to be an ally. So thank you. Thank you so much for coming, and I'll let you close with anything.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you everybody for coming, and also thank you, Congresswoman Betty McCollum. And although I am still deeply concerned about this issue, I'm a little at ease to hear update from our Congresswoman about the conversation she had with the ambassador from Laos, that Laos, LPDR is not willing to accept, our deportation list just yet. But I'm still in dire concern. We still have to continue to pay attention on this matter, and also make sure that this bill move forward, because this is a country that's governed by the people. LPDR ambassador, they can make decisions just like that, but we are governed by the people. We have a process that we are taking, and we need to hear from. We need to hear from the people too at the same time. I know that
also tell your relative that live in other state to contact their congressman, congresswoman, or state or senators and even state senators. You know, I see Congressman Jim Costa is on this too. You know, in Northern California and so forth, and also in Wisconsin, North and South Carolina, Florida. So I want to strongly encourage that, and hopefully the bill passes and we give time to fix our immigration law in support of refugees who are legally coming here to this country. And what I heard from Congresswoman Betty McCollum, I will echo the same, is that we have to stand together. I have spoken to hundreds or so people that possibly will be on the list of deportation. And I know there are different individuals have different degree of incarceration, and they have served their time. But we have to stand together as one community. And I'm thank you for all of you being here, and thank you for our elected official, and especially Congresswoman Betty McCollum and her staff. I also want to see if her office will leave a number, because my office had received overwhelming phone call that with just me and my staff, we can take it all, and we have the house member. We actually designate a house to have an intake phone line for that, and if your office can announce that number so that.
I don't even have to announce it. It's written down for you. It's on the constituent guides. We've got some cards and things on here, and I want to especially thank Charlie, who's been meeting with people on this from my office, and I know that we will get support from the other offices. But if people have an opportunity, call. You know, as I said, we need to move this bill in the Senate. So if you know of family members and community members in other states that I should be reaching out to and talking to their representatives on the floor, I'm happy to do that. So it comes from both angles, from me and from grassroots, and then we continue to have conversations with the Senate. But it would be nice to get a Senate companion bill dropped as soon as possible.
Quick question. In the Senate, and this may sound like a rhetorical question, but because of the makeup of the Senate, what are your thoughts on, do you have a preference for going after a Senate author that is a Democrat or a Republican?
It'd be wonderful to get a Republican, and it'd be wonderful if we could get some Minnesota Republicans on this bill too. I think that they were given some very serious misinformation as to what this means, and if they can stand up for other communities, whether it be Iraqi translators, dreamers, you know, people from Africa that have been at risk of deportation, they should be standing in solidarity and unity with the Lao Hmong residents here in Minnesota, across this country, who entered this country legally and consider this country their home. They shouldn't be treated any different. Thank you.